Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus here in Nome, and also University of Alaska Fairbanks Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome, and you're tonight in the home office. And both University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. And tonight we're really excited, and we're also really glad to see Kim again. She did a straight science earlier in the year to give us what they were going to do this summer, and that was to count beluga in the Yukon River Delta and Norton Sound. And she is true to her word, coming back with the results and more. So Kim Sheldon is a research biologist of quite some note, honestly. She is with the NOAA, NOAA, Alaska Fisheries Science Center. No, I have that wrong. You're the NOAA Marine Mammal Lab, and Kim is with the Large Cetacean Assessment Program, and she is in Seattle. That's where that office is located. And so we thank you, Kim, already for coming at us already late for you and perfect for us. So we appreciate that. And take it away. Kim is going to tell us more about the beluga whale survey effort that went on in the region, and know that we've got some real shebang as far as a speaker. She is well known and career doing all kinds of good large cetacean work. Thank you so much for being here, Kim. We're really glad. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Gabe, for actually just for inviting me to come back and present some of our results from the 2024 survey. And yeah, so for those of you attending my talk today, maybe you also tuned in 2022 for Megan Ferguson's Straight Science Talk, where she presented some of the results from that survey in the area. And maybe you tuned in May for my talk last May, where we described the long-term beluga research program led by the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee. And an important part of this program is to provide information necessary for the beluga hunters to manage their harvest, to make sure it's sustainable in Norton Sound and the Yukon River Delta. And the ABWC, in partnership with NOAA Fisheries, has conducted 3 recent aerial surveys. So today, what I'd like to do for everybody is give you kind of a recap of some of the background information I presented during my previous Straight Science talk about why these aerial surveys are important. And then I'll give everybody an update on the results from the 2024 survey and provide some comparisons to the surveys that took place back in 2017 and in 2022. So leading off, why are belugas important? Well, we know belugas are an important subsistence food for many villages in Norton Sound and along the Yukon, and have been for millennia. And not only is it necessary that belugas be healthy and abundant for our future generations, but that they're also part of a healthy ocean. And belugas are an important part of the ecosystem overall, as both predators and as prey. They're one of the only whales present in large numbers in Norton Sound and the Yukon River Delta during the ice-free months. And so, the more we understand about belugas, the better we understand what's going on in the ecosystem, where they live, and how those ecosystems are changing. And I'd like to thank the ABWC for providing these photographs. I mean, these photos show just how important belugas are to Alaska Native subsistence communities, from hunting and harvesting belugas to preparing the meat and muktuk to share a meal. I mean, all these activities provide opportunities for families and friends to be together, fostering community, strengthening relationships, and belugas are a healthy traditional source of food. So this map kind of provides a simple representation of where belugas have often been found in Norton Sound and the Yukon River Delta. And so to conserve and manage belugas requires knowledge. about the past, present, and future. And this means trying to find answers to a number of questions. So we need to know things like how abundant the population is, and using methods like aerial surveys to count them helps us in order to answer the how many question. What habitats are important to belugas? So we look at their distribution using aerial surveys and satellite tags to help the answer the where are they question. Um, so are the belugas found in this area all part of the same population? And we sometimes also refer to populations as stocks. It's a management term that we use for our stock assessment reports. And how related are these belugas? And so using genetics from skin samples provided by the hunters, we try to answer the who are they question. And then what behaviors do we observe when these belugas are in the different habitats? Are they feeding, mating, raising their young? So kind of that what are they doing question. Um, and then some other bigger questions about how do changes in their prey, for example, salmon runs or herring, changes in sea ice extent and thickness, presence of predators like killer whales, or effects of human activities like noise from shipping and construction affect them, and the kind of that what causes them to stay and go question. And then finally, um, last but not least, is how are contaminants, disease, climate change affecting belugas? And to try to answer the how the healthy are these whales that people need for subsistence. So to help to answer some of these questions, we consider all sources of information: indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, and Western science. And a big part of this is achieved through co-management. And I had shown this, in fact, in my previous talk as well, just to say, here's the definition of co-management that was derived by a number of the Alaska Native organization members and federal agency resource managers. And it was published by the Marine Mammal Commission. And, what it really comes down to is it's a partnership, and it's based on trust and respect, and it's established between an Alaska Native organization, and how that's defined under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and either with us at NOAA Fisheries or with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's with this shared responsibility for conservation of marine mammals and their sustainable subsistence use by these groups. So the ABWC is a co-management group that was established in 1988, and its members are the beluga hunters and also scientists and natural resource managers that include local, state, federal, and tribal governments. And the main goals of the ABWC are to maintain these healthy populations of belugas and to provide for adequate harvest and protecting hunting privileges. So ABWC and NOAA are partners, and so we work together to manage 4 of these beluga stocks. And these stocks or populations are shown here. The areas where they spend their summer months are kind of highlighted in this map here. And so the Eastern Bering Sea stock is the stock that's found in Norton Sound and the Yukon, and hopefully you can see my little laser pointer here, but it's the one here found in orange, and that's going to be the primary focus of the talk. The Eastern Chukchi Sea stock and the Beaufort Sea stock, whose summer ranges overlap in the Arctic here. As you can see, these two stocks overlap here in the summer months. And then the southernmost stock that the ABWC works with is the Bristol Bay stock here, which primarily resides year-round in this area. The Cook Inlet stock, another population that I've also worked on, is not managed by the ABWC. This population is listed as endangered, and hunting has not been allowed since 2005. And currently, the belugas found up here in Kotzebue Sound are being evaluated based on a recommendation from ABWC, but are not currently recognized as a stock. So In 1999 is when NOAA Fisheries and the ABWC began co-managing belugas. Um, and work conducted by NOAA is regulated under laws such as I mentioned, the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act. And part of our work here at NOAA is to help provide support through collaborating and to provide funding. So without abundance estimates, it's very difficult to know whether the beluga harvest is sustainable. So scientists take into account such things as how many belugas there are, how often they reproduce, how old they are when they have their first calves. And we use this information to determine how many belugas can be harvested and have the population stay healthy and not decline. And, beluga abundance is also an indicator of ecosystem health. So, how exactly do we go about counting them? Well, for our methods for this particular project, the standard method that the ABWC and NOAA have used to estimate abundance for Eastern Bering Sea belugas and other beluga populations is aerial surveys. So these photos show the aircraft. It's a twin engine turbo commander. It was used during the recent aerial surveys in 2017, 2022, and 2024. We have two pilots, as you see here in the front of the aircraft. Our pilots check in hourly with personnel who are flight following us during the survey to let them know all is well, given the remote areas where these surveys occur. We have one observer looking out the left window and another looking out the right. This happens to be me over here. And these windows are specially designed so we can actually fit our heads out and look ahead, beneath, and outward from the aircraft. One scientist is recording data into a laptop computer that also runs a survey program we have specially designed for this project. And that laptop is connected to a GPS unit. So the survey program itself is able to collect time and location data, the latitude, longitude, and altitude every 30 seconds, or whenever we have an environmental or viewing condition change, or if there's a marine mammal sighting. So we include conditions like sea state, water turbidity, how far the observers can see, cloud cover, if there's any impediments like glare, fog, haze, rain, ice, low clouds, all those fun things we encounter in Norton Sound. When we do see a marine mammal, the observers use a clinometer to get an angle to the sighting when the animal comes abeam of the aircraft. So, not when it's seen up ahead or behind. But sometimes this means the animal is no longer at the surface by the time its location comes abeam. So, the location may be based on blueprints or other disturbances at the surface. For our 2024 survey, we had a camera that was mounted in the belly of the plane. This was to help with detecting whales that might surface directly under the plane. And it was also to help us document, hopefully, we hoped at the time, the presence of calves, juveniles, and adults based on body color. Because for our belugas, calves are typically much smaller, usually darker in color. There's a little calf here. There's another one kind of on top of this adult animal here. Juveniles are usually gray. It's a little hard to tell that this animal is a little grayer, maybe. And then adults, usually by the time they're adults, they're bright white. So, in a line transect aerial survey, um, we have our aircraft, which we have flies along an imaginary line, which we call a transect, and the observers scan for belugas. And for our surveys in Norton Sound, we fly at an altitude of just over 1,000 feet and at a speed of about 115 knots. So at this altitude, sounds from the plane rarely disturb the whales. We don't see any reactions to the aircraft going by. So as we fly along, for the observer, some of the belugas are detected by the observers, but some are not detected. And this is how these are things we need to know in order to get at the abundance estimate. So we need to estimate what part of the population was not detected. So this unknown quantity is called the detection probability. And in this case, were whales at the surface and not seen, or were whales beneath the surface, so not available to be seen? And for our surveys, we defined a group of belugas as any whales that are within 5 body lengths of one another. And so sometimes we run into some difficulties, because when a lot of belugas are present, which sometimes happens, we get these really, really big groups. The observers will have to do a running count because they just can't get a chronometer angle for every whale. So we'll start a count and just keep counting whales till we get to the end of the line, sum those all up, and kind of give an average angle to where the midpoint of that massive group might have been. Typically, we try to stay on transect the entire survey, but there are times when we do break from the track line, and sometimes we do this to confirm a sighting or to document marine mammals other than belugas or any dead marine mammals. So at that point, we leave the track line to circle and we collect photographs through a side window that can be opened. So Megan, in her talk, provided quite a few details, I believe, on the past surveys during her Strait Science talk in 2022. These surveys began back in 1992 and were repeated each year until 1995. And then they resumed again in 1999 and 2000. And so the one map panel over here shows all the track lines and locations of sightings, which are those different colored dots for each year during each of those years in the past. And then this other panel is a satellite image of the water. So that massive mud plume we often see coming off of the Yukon River Delta into Norton Sound area. And then these are the actual group sizes. So you can see more often up in this area, they're much like maybe single whale sightings and things. And then we get these really big groups of whales, in particular, right around this region in the past. And as you can see in both of these groups, some of the largest groups and most whales were found, as I mentioned, along the Yukon River Delta, along the coastline, and mostly in water ranging from 5 to 15 meters in depth. And for more information on these surveys, there's a paper by Lloyd Lowry that's noted down here. There's also the website maintained by the North Slope Borough that has a lot of this information from these past surveys. So now I'd like to go on and focus on the results from our most recent surveys in 2024 with some of the comparisons to the surveys we did in 2017 and 2022. So brief recap of what we planned for 2024. So the team had planned to arrive in Nome on June 17th. This timing was based on the 2017 survey and past surveys. We had extended the survey until July 5th to account for poor weather days. And as you'll see, because of 2022, we had a lot of bad weather, and unfortunately, we couldn't extend our time period. And that really affected some of the work we were able to do that year. Based on recommendations from the ABWC, we added even more lines south to Hooper Bay. So this whole area down here was added. And this was something we did spur of the moment in 2022. We also added a high density area. And this is the shaded area in the map here that we hope to sample multiple times. And as I mentioned, we plan to test the camera mounted in the belly to collect images of whales. We had mentioned that a field report documenting the distribution of whales and our survey effort should be available by this past fall. And finally, then that we hoped to have an abundance estimate completed by the fall of 2025. So it actually happened. So, as planned, our team did arrive in Nome on June 17th. And we had amazing weather. Compared to 2022, it was amazing for the most part, and ended up completing almost all our track lines. As you can see here, these lines on the map, there's a few gaps, but we were really happy. We were able to complete most of them, and some more than once. These little bit thicker lines are where we were able to get extra sampling in the high density stratum. Before leaving, a few days early before the 4th of July and storms that were predicted to come into the eastern Bering Sea. We flew during this 17-day project. We were able to fly on seven days for that. Um, we covered about 7,000 kilometers of track line during 48 hours of surveying. Uh, Unfortunately, getting south to Hooper Bay was tough. We had low clouds in the area between Hooper Bay and Pastel Bay, but we were finally able to get there near the end of the survey time period. So we were pretty happy. We were at least able to get down there once during the survey. Um, as I mentioned, we had that high density area. We actually extended it. So we brought it all the way down to Scammon Bay because we really hoped to sample there again. But unfortunately, that did not happen. But as I said, we were able to sample between Unalakleet and Pastel Bay and in Norton Bay multiple times. Um, and so, as I said, these you can see these lines are a little bit thicker where we were able to get a little more than one sample. Um, we collected over 29,000 images with our Bellyport camera. We on a preliminary review of some of those images where we had some observer sightings we thought we could match to it. We found that we had some of the same issues with seeing belugas in photographs that observers have when looking for belugas. Sometimes there was too much sun glare on the water or low clouds beneath the plane. Other times the whales were already below the surface by the time the plane was passing over them. And during running counts, we couldn't match the observer sighting to a whale in a photograph since we didn't have a clinometer angle for every single sighting. So, with so many images, though, we really hope in the future to use some of these to help train a computer program to detect the whales automatically using artificial intelligence and machine learning. Because there's just not enough hours in the day for someone to go through all these images looking for whales. I mentioned the field report, and we did document the distribution of the whales in our survey effort, and that report was published this past October. And we presented the results to the at the November ABWC meeting. And we are still currently planning to have an abundance estimate completed by the fall of this year. Um, so, what else happened in 2024? Well, we photographed 5 dead belugas during the survey, and we reported them to the Alaska Marine Mammal Stranding Network. As I mentioned earlier, these are photographs that we take through an opening side window after we leave the track line to circle. Other marine mammal sightings included a minke whale. We had 4 harbor porpoise. We had 5 small pinnipeds. We could not identify the species since we were above 1,000 feet. And we also had a pod of 6 killer whales. And the presence of killer whales may have had an effect on beluga distribution. We saw a notable shift in beluga distribution after a survey on June 20th. When we flew again on June 24th, it was after a few bad weather days. We saw only a few belugas north of Stebbins, and this was after we encountered a group of killer whales north of Pastel Bay. And at first, the 6 killer whales just appeared to be resting at the surface. But then they began milling and were surface active with a breach and tail slap during our photographic passes. So later in the survey, during a refueling stop in Unalakleet on July 1st, we talked with local residents at the airport, and they reported that a pod of at least 6 killer whales had been seen repeatedly in the area. And that same day on July 1st, we saw large numbers of belugas in very, very shallow water in Pastel Bay. And that's an area where, as I mentioned, we've not really seen belugas at all during surveys or only in really small numbers during past surveys. And um, so we were able to get photographs of potential photo ID quality for several of the killer whales observed on June 24th. And we sent them to researchers to see if they might match to photographs of known mammal eating killer whales in the Western transient group. And the researchers were able to make one match to a known animal, an adult male. His ID number is WT55, but he's nicknamed Purr. who was photographed near False Pass in 2003, and he was tagged with a satellite transmitter in 2008. And this whale was an adult at that time. And he has this very distinct, as you can see, really curvy dorsal fin. So the photos of another male, this male shown here, could not be conclusively matched, nor a female that we had a good picture of to any of the Western transient whales in the field catalog. This catalog includes 400 photo identification images, and they were collected from 2001 to 2008. And it's possible these unmatched whales were either too young or they just weren't even born yet at that time. Um, these Western transients are thought to be following migrating gray whales as they head up to the Chukchi Sea. So, doing a little background research, we looked in August of 2012, there was an adult male, WT30, who was photographed with a pod of killer whales, and he was seen near shore in the Chukchi Sea between Icy Cape and Point Barrow. And in July of 2013, some of you may have been in the area when there was an attempted predation event with 7 killer whales surrounding a gray whale cow with her calf that was documented right off Nome. Although the images from the video that of the Nome encounter were not really clear enough to match to any of the Western transient whales when we tried to send that to the research as well. There was a large male in that group with a collapsed dorsal fin, and there are 3 Western transient males with a collapsed dorsal fin that have been photographed near False Pass. It's just we couldn't match that animal conclusively to that in that case. But with our beluga carcasses, the images just aren't of high enough resolution to see if there were any signs of killer whale predation or if something else may have caused their deaths. So, uh, so again, now going from how did our 2024, too many 2020s, compare to the previous 2 surveys. So as I mentioned, in 2017, the aerial team just had amazing weather and they were able to fly most of the track lines multiple times. And so you see here these thick black lines with the white circles showing the beluga sightings and the group sizes for the animals they saw that year. And as I said, in 2022, unfortunately, weather did not cooperate with us. We also had to start later in the season, later in June than we had for past surveys because of COVID restrictions that we had to meet before we could put any field teams into the field that year. We were still pretty unable to, we had to meet a lot of requirements just to be able to go into the field to do the work that we did that year. So, and that, as I mentioned, that was the year we had also added some track lines farther south to Hooper Bay based on recommendation from the ABWC. So, moving on to 2024, we had fairly good weather, as you can tell from our survey coverage. We were able to survey south to Hooper Bay and fly some track lines more than once in the high density area. And I also mentioned about seeing these large numbers in Paso Bay where we had not seen many belugas in previous years following our sighting of those mammal-eating killer whales in the area. So this table provides a summary of our survey effort, and it's also in the published field report, but just kind of walking you through some of these comparisons, you can kind of see 2017, exceptionally good weather, lots of flights, not so much in 2022. And again, not terrible, pretty good for 2024. And again, we had great conditions, so we were able to get a lot done. You may notice that our total beluga sightings were lower in 2024 than in 2017. But total overall numbers of belugas seen wasn't. So we had bigger group sizes in 2024 than we had in those previous years. And similarly, where we showed on transect the reason the total count is lower and the belugas per kilometer is lower in 2024 is in part because there were these really big groups um, north of Scammon Bay. And when they were counted by the observers, it was when they were circling, they were not when they were on transect because they had departed the track line to check on a sighting and started encountering lots and lots of whales. And so whales need to be seen while on the track line to be included in that on transect total and to calculate the encounter rate. So that's, of course, the numbers of beluga seen per kilometer on the track line surveyed. So that's really what's driving that lower um, sighting rate for this year. And we do have a poster at the Alaska Marine Science Symposium. It'll be a Tuesday, January 28th in row 10 at the Egan Center. So if anyone is in Anchorage for that meeting and wants to stop by, I plan to be at our poster at 6 p.m. So moving on now, our next steps, as I mentioned, is abundance estimation. And so just to give you a recap for folks who attended the May meeting as well, the May presentation I gave as well, Megan's currently working on publishing abundance estimates for the surveys conducted in 2017 and 2022. So it's kind of similar to the previous slide. These two panels show the planned track lines. The thicker track lines are those that they were actually able to survey. The blue dots are the beluga group sizes seen in 2017 and 2022. And so they've applied, Megan and co-authors have applied two types of models to the data. And as I mentioned, these models correct the counts for by considering the amount of area surveyed, how often it was surveyed, the area not surveyed due to bad weather or poor sighting conditions, how many belugas that may have been missed on the track line, so they were not detected, and belugas that were below the surface, so they're not available to be counted. The model also takes into consideration size of groups. So for the first model, the design-based model, which is based on just the conventional line transect, the estimate came to about 12,000 belugas in 2017 and about 20,000 in 2022. So using that, Megan then took that design-based model and compared it to 4 different spatial models that are going to be combined into an overall model. And so in these spatial models, the study area was divided into these smaller units. It's like a honeycomb. And the model assumes that beluga density is constant within a single honeycomb cell. And we feel this really matches better with the patchiness of where belugas occur than just using a line transect method that was shown on the previous slide. So here, the brighter the color, the greater the number of belugas. And you can see that the number is not the same. So say here in 2017 compared to 2022, for example, in these yellow cells, in 2017, this was about 200 to 250 belugas, but in 2022, it's more like 900 to over 1,000 belugas in that particular cell. So looking at the results from these spatial models, right now the numbers are very preliminary, but we get an abundance in 2017 of about 11,500 and about 13,500 for 2022, which is a bit lower than the estimates from the line transect method, which in that case it was like 12,000 in 2017 and closer to 20,000 for 2022. But as I said, these models are still being reviewed before deciding on a final model. And so there may be changes to these numbers once the publication is accepted. Paul Kahn is the second author on the paper, and he will be working on the estimate from our 2024 survey. So eventually, these estimates will be used to calculate the potential biological removal level. So for the Eastern Bering Sea Beluga Stock Assessment Report that comes out, and that's the number that was developed to manage commercial fisheries, not subsistence harvest. But this is the maximum number of animals, not including natural mortalities that may be removed from a marine mammal stock, while allowing that stock to still continue to thrive. So currently, the potential biological removal level in the most recent stock assessment report that was published in 2023 is 267 belugas. And this number is based on the design-based model estimate from 2017 of about the 12,000 belugas. So just to put that in perspective, the average harvest of belugas between 2016 and 2020 in the Norton Sound area and Yukon Delta was about 227 belugas per year. And we hope to have all of these numbers updated when the Eastern Bering Sea beluga stock assessment report is revised. I believe it's going to be revised sometime this year and come out in 2026 at some point. So overall, the belugas continue to occupy those shallower regions of the Norton Sound, Yukon River Delta study area in late June and early July, similar to what was documented in past aerial surveys. And for 2024, we have some considerations, some things to definitely consider: the effects of the large dispersed aggregation north of Scammon Bay, and that shift south in distribution that was possibly caused by killer whale presence. So some of these things will be things that Paul Kahn will be considering as he's calculating the abundance estimate for 2024. And I would just like to acknowledge the ABWC and its executive committee, without which this work could not be accomplished, and our leadership at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center and the Alaska Regional Office, and Megan Ferguson for her work on this project, and the pioneering efforts of Lloyd Lowry and Doug DeMaster. Our survey team for 2024 included myself and Amelia and Cynthia and Kim. And I'd like to thank the ABWC for contracting Clearwater Air. These aircraft are specially designed for these types of surveys and have worked with us on numerous projects throughout Alaska. And finally, I'd like to thank Dave Ellifrit and Craig Matkin for identifying the Western transient killer whale ID. That was really cool to have that and have that show up in our report. And so I've provided a QR code here that links to our 2024 field report. If folks want to download that, it's also available in the NOAA repository website. This report also provides our daily flight summaries. It includes examples of some of the images we took with the belly port camera, other images of the beluga carcasses, the 5 carcasses we collected, and a few other killer whale images, as well as the main body of the report. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have a poster at the Alaska Marine Science Symposium. So I'm super happy to take any questions anybody might have. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Kim. What a great presentation. You actually had me working on the side, so I've got some news for you as well. So I wasn't hearing the whole thing, but what was the, we don't have a population estimate for 2024 yet, or did we?
No, not yet. Mm-mm. Yeah, it's common, I hope.
Okay, no, that's fine. It was good to get all of it, all the information, and it's such a very educational too for someone like me who's not in the beluga world to see how that's getting done. So let's open it up. First, what we do at Strait Science is throw some love to Kim Sheldon in the chat. Honestly, it is never easy to be a public speaker. And here she is at whatever it is now, after 8 o'clock at night on a weeknight. And she's given it to us because she's taken that extra effort, which we really appreciate up here. So I know I've got questions. Anybody else? We have a caller on the line, and callers get preferential treatment because it is never easy to be a caller on a Strait Science call. You can't wave your hands or butt in ski in, but actually you can butt in ski in. It's pound, I think it's *6 for the caller. And if you have a question, do butt in ski right in. And if you are having trouble, because some people have trouble with the *6, or for some reason, sometimes Zoom doesn't let you guys come in. I don't know what I've touched. You can also call my cell phone, which is 907-434-1149. You can either text or call, and we can get your question relayed that way as well, because callers are important. So I'll give first, right off the bat, go for it. Rob Kaler, thank you so much. Take it away.
Hey, great presentation. Thank you so much. So I'm U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I do at sea and shoreline surveys for marine birds. And I'm sorry if I missed this. Do you do a double observer method to address the detection for belugas or other marine mammals?
You mean having like a second observer behind the first observer in the
Yeah, where
aircraft?
and you're not talking, you just know, and then by the time you detect that animal, then somebody says, "Hey, I detected an
Right.
animal," and then you circle back around.
Right. No, not for this particular survey. We don't do that. And that was part of the reason to put a camera in the belly port, was to kind of be that, also possibly that independent observer to try and pick out animals. The camera itself can cover the track line and out to about I want to say an angle inclinometer a clinometer angle, that where the observers see out about 45 degrees. So it's not capturing the whole field of view of the observer, but we thought that could be a partial correction if we could tie those observer sightings back to any animals we saw in the camera. But no, yeah, we don't. We've done that with some other surveys where we do have paired, like in Cook Inlet. In particular, we do have that other independent observer behind that usually punches the computer operator to say, "Hey, they missed one," type of thing. But yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and did you mention like how wide is your transect that you're surveying?
Your
So
swath.
these, yeah, these are I believe, shoot, I'm gonna have to go back and look again really quickly because I might not be exactly right. I want to say I'm gonna get my kilometers and miles mixed up, that they're 9 kilometers apart, about 6 miles, 5 to 6 miles apart. And the observers are looking out to the horizon. But of course, that detection falls off pretty quickly. And I would have to look at Megan's detection function to recall exactly, where that curve starts to drop off pretty steeply, and observers aren't detecting them out at greater distances.
Rob, drop your email address in the chat. If that way Kim can send you, because that sounds like something she needs to, that's not something right on the top of her head.
Yeah,
Understand,
no.
understandable.
And
So,
and then one final question would be,
yeah.
are you using machine learning for your I forget, I'm sorry if you mentioned this during your presentation. And it was great. I, learned a lot. It's awesome.
I'm sorry if I went really fast. I tend to speed up.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's all good. Yeah. But yeah, machine learning and some of yeah, but yeah, if you drop your email in the chat, I'll happy to follow up with you separately.
yeah, so for the machine learning itself, we the our whole division is starting to explore this more and more because of the quantity of just digital imagery that we have, and in fact acoustic data we have to go through as well. So that really is kind of the wave of the future. And we've been doing some training of AI with some of the photo ID databases, like some of our beluga photos from Cook Inlet, trying to help with matching, because again, we have so many images that, I'm sorry, my cat just jumped onto the top of the cabinet in here. You crazy psycho.
At least she doesn't bark. That we had that one where the dog went bonkers during the straight science and wouldn't stop barking, and the poor speaker was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But anyway, yeah, cat jumping. Who cares? That's
Yes, but no, yeah, this the whole machine learning and AI development, I really think we were looking at just how long it would take two people to go through all these images, and you get into years of just trying to go through and make sure every image is looked at, type of thing, where this would hopefully speed that process up quite a bit. So yeah. but we're still not quite there yet. They're just starting to train some of these and develop algorithms for them, but it's exciting to think about.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Great presentation.
All right. Any other questions in the chat or hands up, or don't forget the caller on? Okay, Sue Moore, you also had a question in the chat. Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Gay. I also just wanted to thank Kim for a great presentation. And Kim, just looking at your maps that you showed a couple times of the 3 years, I'm wondering, this is a question in the chat, if you've thought about randomized stratified sampling of you and Paul and others at the Marine Mammal Lab, because not that I'm a statistician, as you know I'm not, but it seems to me that because when you encounter large groups, and as you said in your presentation, you really can't get a good angle on them for transect sampling. But if you randomize the areas where you see those big groups and then sample them, you don't have to stick to the line transect rules. And I think perhaps that might help in focusing on a better estimate of actual numbers of whales. So I say that by my old history of aerial surveys and the fact that we looked into randomized sampling in that way. So it's not randomized transects, it's actually randomized areas that you define based on transect surveys, but then it allows you to spend more time, you can circle, you can count. And I'm just wondering if that is in discussion with your group at the Marine Mammal Lab.
Yeah, Sue, it's so good to see you. It's like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah.
you know, Sue, I'm the one they say, hey, go fly it. I do what they tell me to do.
I remember that. Yeah.
And Megan and others, like you said, Paul and all those folks are the ones I lean on to say, how should I fly this? And what do we need? And how do we get to the answers that we need, right? And then I'll put on my cap and I'll go fly it for you. So those are really, really good questions. And like you said, I kind of lean on our statisticians at the time at the lab for why we ended up going with the design we went with. I think some of this was based, if we were going to try and get a trend line to go through this, we had to kind of keep some of the methodology that was similar to what Lloyd and Kathy had done back in the day. And we do still kind of fall into that same sampling strategy, similar to what's going to be happening up on the North Slope this year because of how things were done under the bee wasp years and everything else. Trying not to move too far away from that if we want to compare back across years. But so, the animals are doing different things too, right? So, and with climate change, who knows? They're not doing the same things anymore either. So maybe we need to have more of this.
It's not, for me, it's not even climate change, Kim. I mean, I flew some of those surveys with Lloyd and Kathy. I flew Norton Sound with Lloyd and had many conversations. But the thing for me is getting a better methodology that reflects what the animals are doing. And line transect fails to provide that methodology. I would say even by your 2017 and 2022 maps. I mean, so that's why I'm saying this. And you'll hear the question from me again. I raised the question, but not formally at the ABWC meeting in November. There wasn't really time for discussion there. And I don't mean to burden you with it. I just wanted you to know that that's what's on my mind. Because I think that it might be time to consider a change in methodology. I understand keeping the methodology the same for comparative reasons, certainly. But, if transect methodology is missing these big aggregations and you can do it in a different randomized, statistically supportable way, then maybe it's time to have that discussion. That's all. Yeah. You did a great job. Wonderful presentation.
So I appreciate that.
Just for what the rest of the audience, just know that discussion was about the different ways. Thank you, Sue. The different ways that the aircraft is used and flown in order to get do their mathematics to get the abundance estimate. Go ahead, Austin. I see your hand up. Hopefully,
Yeah, hey, thanks. Hey,
yep.
great
Hi.
presentation. Um, I saw mini beluga uh, here as late as December 19, 45 miles west of Nome, large concentrations. And I see that the transects don't seem to take that into consideration. Is there an assumption that they aren't in that area? And I guess if that is an assumption, how does that, I guess, frame our understanding, or I guess the reality that there are large concentrations in this area considerably west of Nome as late as December 19th.
Well,
Can I
and
just
we
ask
know
a
in, I'm
question,
sorry.
Austin? Is that to figure out, are you saying that they're counting, that they're missing some potentially for their estimate?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I
Or
mean, they
just in
could be.
general knowing?
They could be. I mean, but is there an assumption that where your northern transect, I guess, ends, is there
Okay.
an assumption that they don't exist north of those transects?
At that time?
Yeah,
Okay.
In June and July.
yeah.
I think that is the, I'm sure there are some animals that are in those areas, and we do see that, but I think we're assuming that the bulk of most of the Eastern Bering Sea stock is going to be in Norton Sound in late June and early July. By that time, hopefully, most of them will have arrived, and they'll be trying to feed as much as possible on whatever salmon or herring or whatever is present at that time. Of course, by winter time, we're expecting them to be moving out because of ice or other things, but also just because they're probably looking for different prey types at that point. So we would expect larger groups to be showing up. My cat just jumped off the couch. Sorry. Just scared me. At that time of year in winter, definitely moving out more into the Strait area. But yeah, there is always that concern, and that was one of the reasons that the ABWC was strongly recommending that we go farther south than had been done in the past, because Hooper Bay and other areas were seeing large numbers of animals. So it just gets to a point logistically, though, we don't have the flight, we don't have the fuel, we don't have the support to be able to fuel up and go farther out, things like that. So some of that comes into it as well. But yeah, you do wonder. I mean, we're never always 100% sure.
Did that help, Austin? I have a follow-up question on that. Did that
Yeah, I
help
guess,
answer?
yeah,
Okay.
just maybe to put my observation in perspective, I probably saw hundreds to maybe 1,000 in the area west of Nome, as far west as 45 miles west of Nome, as late as December 19th.
So my question, thank you for that. And my question is, are the reason you do this surveys in the summer is because you're concentrating on one genetic stock so that like
Yeah.
there are, like we're just hearing right now, there are these very large amounts of belugas utilizing the Northern Bering Sea locally, Norton Sound probably. And is that you're trying to get what the Eastern beluga,
Yes,
the stock,
exactly.
you're looking for the
Mhm.
stock, and in the winter, all those stocks are coming from Kotzebue, Koktovik, Chukotka. They're all
Right.
coming down. Is that what? And that's why
Yeah.
you guys fly, is to get that genetic question answered? The population of,
Yeah, I think maybe it would have been helpful to kind of put that, like I was mentioning some of the genetics that we're looking at, from what Greg O'Cory Crow did with going, out to the villages collecting samples and showing that there's these really strong kind of driven by the mothers bringing their young back to the same areas, to these summering areas year after year. So there's really strong fidelity to come back to Norton Sound. And that's why we try to do most of these, well, also weather-wise, we don't have the daylight or the weather in the winter to be able to really survey and find them even. But and we ran into that in Cook Inlet when we tried to do winter surveys. You just can't find the whales, and there are hundreds of them. So where are they? But yeah, Gay, like you were saying, in the wintertime, we get all these other stocks coming together too, because they're all coming down into that area, northern Bering Sea, and they're mixing, but they're not mixing. It's interesting with the genetics. There's not that much interbreeding going on between the stocks. So that's kind of an interesting thing too. So yeah, it's this distinct group of whales that comes back that we're trying to get numbers for each summer. Does that help? I mean, maybe I'm getting into the weeds a little bit too much.
No, it helps me understand to answer for you answering Austin's very good citing is that
Yes,
you're coming to an area at a time of year when they're separating themselves out into their little non-interbreeding stocks, because ultimately what I think, and stop me if I'm wrong here, but ultimately you're trying to get these estimates because you want to know how the beluga whales of the eastern Bering Sea stock are doing that use the Yukon River and Norton Sound. And then you'd mentioned potential biological removal, which gives an estimate, and you're co-managing with harvesters from the 6 communities I think are represented in the Alaska Eskimo Beluga Whale Committee. 6 of the Bering Strait regional Eastern Norton Sound communities are involved with that co-management group. And you're trying to figure out, are the beluga okay? And that's a food security question and a population question, right? And so
right,
is
right.
everything good? And it sounds like we don't know what the population estimate will be yet final, and we're glad to see what we've got from these other 2 years, but it sounds like, I think you said something like, I tried to write it down quick, 227 or 267 is the potential biological removal. Not that's a fisheries term, not a
Right,
subsistence term, but it gives you some indicator perhaps of how beluga are doing and what is not going to bother them, the population at
right.
all.
Yeah, because that is the concern, right? You don't want to have the level of harvest be so high that the animals just aren't going to be able to recover. They're going to decline, and they're not going to be there for future generations. So it's
Or any
that's
other effects that would hurt the, remove
Mhm.
belugas. And
Right, right. Well, you mentioned other concerns, if fisheries start moving up into this area, are we going to have bycatch
commercial,
problems, all kinds of things like that with commercial fisheries?
not
Um,
commercial. We have commercial fishing here. What I'm talking about is the industrial commercial fishing
industrial.
that comes
Mhm.
with not our localized subsistence or commercial fishery, but the big players that are doing pollock. We do have some of that going on already from the Russians. They're here just on the other side of the line. This is a small amount of water actually in the Bering Strait region, and they're already in the central Chukchi, right? Trawling.
Mhm.
So we don't have no idea what's going on there. But I'm gonna, since I don't see any other burning question, when you mentioned you saw those 5 belugas dead floating, or
Yeah, we had 5
and you
carcasses
mentioned
this year.
potential predation. So this was an interesting year for us. It was unusual. Between August to September, we had 6 dead adult beluga wash in, or were at least documented here in the Nome, Safety Sound, and West Beach area.
Mm.
And when we also had, within a 4-week span, 2 live unattended beluga calves that had to be euthanized here.
Mm.
Those carcasses were then sent into NOAA. And honestly, we have some NOAA representation here, so maybe I should say this here, but we haven't really heard back on what was and maybe they're waiting for lab results. So I'm not being tough here, but we really haven't heard a lot about what happened to those calves. We sent the carcasses. It was a big
Mm.
undertaking for us to get these carcasses euthanized and then shipped back immediately, unfrozen, to the lab so they could do a great workup on that. I wanted to let you guys know so that if there's some follow-up there you want to do, we can give you the specimen IDs. And this was not just me, this was me and Chuck Manadaluk with the Coeric Subsistence Program. So we both respond to strandings. So it was really interesting that we did not hear of any strandings in Norton Sound or Nome. That wasn't really brought to our attention that I remember at all. So meanwhile, we had these other 6 dead adults. So it was just it was a real peak of beluga for us. That's an unusual number, 8 within a few weeks. So they did not look like the ones that I saw or saw photos of. They did not look like they had been stripped or peeled or killed by killer whale. So we didn't know what was going on there. We all live with a lot of curiosity and trepidation regarding avian influenza. So and other things that can there's plenty of things that can go after marine mammals and any kind of animals, but we were noticing that uptick and reporting it. The other thing I wanted to mention is the orca are not unusual in this region. We have orca every year and they come around. But from 2010 to 2016, we did have reported 9 dead stranded orca in the Bering Strait region and throughout the, so that's, you know, there was an incident that was prior to those that there were 5 beluga that were caught in the ice and ended up dying. And that was brought to the attention of responders here in the Nome area. Too late to do anything about it. They were already, that was like years ago. But it was very interesting to note that, you know, and there's reports somewhere, I probably have the notes of like these super pods of orcas that are off St. Lawrence Island, like 60, 70, so forth, beluga, killer whale, excuse me. And I did want to say though, that between those 9 stranded animals, we had collected soft tissues from 3 of those so that they could get the genetics and tell us where those beluga, and this would be this NOAA Alaska Stranding Network. And we'd love to hear back on where those beluga were from. And they have that information since 2016. I think we heard maybe back on one that they were from the Unalaska area down in the Aleutians, but know that somebody has that soft tissue, and we were told we would get back, they would get back about what the stock would be. And I know it's a big state and everything, but I don't think we've ever heard back on those. So you might want to, things that might be good for you to know, or if you have more information, questions or things like that, we'd really love to
that, I mean, that's
learn.
really great. I would definitely want to circle back with maybe Mandy Keogh about
Keogh, yep.
With that, because you know, now that she's the stranding coordinator, they've been trying to update all those databases and getting them matched up to the national database a bit better. And I've been more working with the Cook Inlet stuff, just trying to get all that cleaned up. But it may well be that they have that information. It's been logged in that database. And
Sure. Oh,
unfortunately,
I'm sure.
But yeah, that's good point.
Bring it back. We'd love it. And with the 2 abandoned calves, we went down there and there was nothing in attendance. One of these calves had to wait overnight. And oh, awesome comment in the chat from Austin Amosic. In 2009, I harvested a beluga calf that was stranded from a killer whale event. I suspect those kind of events routinely happen. Thank you, Austin. I'm kind of sort of mentioning that, but we did see this 4 weeks apart, August 7th, and then again on the 28th, or 3 weeks apart, in the same location, and that was over by the Safety Sound Bridge, the live calves. That's unusual. I mean, to see a live, for me, to see a live, and we had another live beluga. I mean, if I went back and looked at how many beluga whale calves, we have had others in the past, but 2 in 3 weeks is noteworthy, along with the other adults that were washing in. So
That
anyway, I
is
just
really
wanted to pass that along. I was behind the scenes here going, oh man, actually, this might be important. I don't know. And I just want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you, Austin. Anyone have a question for Kim? I was wondering, how do we get a copy of the stranding or of the field trip report too, before I throw it open? Where do we go to get that?
Oh, so actually, well, with your smartphone, that will take you to the repository, but I can certainly provide the link to that if I can get
To the
back
repository?
to so folks can just go and they can download it right from there. Or
Cool.
we're not really making hard copies anymore of stuff. Everything seems to be electronic these days. So, but yeah,
Way of the world, I guess.
I think I was gonna go ahead and add my email for
Oh,
folks.
wonderful.
If
So
folks wanna
give
just
Kim
get
a second here so she doesn't while she's getting all her emails and doing all that. Perfect, Rob, you got another question. Hang on. And anyone have think about your questions or comments?
Am I ready to go?
Well, there she goes. There's Kim Sheldon's contact information in her email in the chat. And
Yeah. Awesome, Kim, because I will follow up with you. I'm going to be working in Cook Inlet, so would love to yeah,
Oh,
talk with
great.
you more. Yeah, I'm a seabird person with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I guess I was wondering, you mentioned that the information, those the photographic identifications, you're passing that on like Happy Whale. Is that what you're doing, or who
No,
do you just kind of put it out there?
actually for these particular animals, since we were kind of the only folks we know who have been working pretty extensively with some of the transient killer whales were so Craig Matkin and Dave Ellifrit, who we reached out to.
Okay.
And they were the ones who actually did the initial photo ID catalog and false pass, because they were tracking all the encounters with when the gray whales were coming through, and they were targeting the killer whales were targeting their calves as they were coming north to go up to the Chukchi. So, but that catalog hasn't been updated. We, unfortunately, as we all know, certain projects get higher priority. The killer whale project hasn't had funding for a number of years. And so getting back out to those areas and adding to that catalog has been tough. I mean, there's been some amazing papers that have come out. And I think there's some recent ones with all the satellite tagging that they've done on those killer whales. But it's been a while. I mean, I think some of the last tagging was in the earlier, maybe later 2000s, but not as much since then. But yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yes. And I work with Craig, Gulf Watch Alaska, U.S. Trustee Council. So yeah, that's very cool. All right. Well, we should probably let you go. I know it's getting late. So thanks. You did a great job. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. The cat's finally asleep.
any other questions? Thanks, Rob. Any other questions for Sue? I just put in the link for the NOAA Marine Mammal Library. Is that the link you were thinking of where we could
I
get
was
that?
trying to think if I could get that. Where? Grab that NOAA repository one.
And then there was a search engine or a search bar. You could do beluga whales in there. It's kind of how I was going.
Yeah, there's in fact all of our reports now are pretty much in the NOAA repository, institutional repository, I should call it. And if you go there, you can do things like search on my last name, or it'll bring up all these different reports. But I don't know if this is the same link you found, but
I went straight to the
is
Marine Mammal Library. Okay, repository, different, but great to have that. For anyone online, that's probably a really good link.
Oh, for everything. I mean, everything.
All right.
Fisheries, environmental impact statements. I mean, it's the whole range of
Wonderful.
documents. They're trying to get all these NOAA documents into one place. So, yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So let's see. With that, we should let you go. We really thank you. Are we going to see you next summer?
No,
2020 or this summer, 2025, are you guys going to survey? How often would we expect to see these beluga surveys?
so
Thinking that the money will be okay. Just, if it was a perfect world, we don't know what's going to happen next. But
exactly.
if you were going to just keep proceeding, would
So
we
what
see you?
because there's so many beluga stocks for Alaska, it's kind of a rotating schedule to try and get
Okay.
the abundance estimate. So this summer, we're going to be flying in the Chukchi and Beaufort and
Okay.
working, and that'll be primarily to, given the timing, we're hoping we're going to be encountering mostly Beaufort Sea belugas to get that abundance estimate, and hopefully the Chukchi animals have moved where they're going to be for the summer, so they'll be separated. But we know that's a little bit tougher, like you said. They overlap a lot up there in the summer. So, uh, but we're working with our Canadian partners and the North Slope Borough on that project because we're going to be going all the way into Canadian airspace and working in Amundsen Gulf as well, because it's primarily to get a bowhead abundance estimate in time for the IWC. So, and we'll have a Cook Inlet survey because we had to cancel our Cook Inlet survey last in 2024 because there was a mechanical issue with the aircraft. So we'll be doing that this year as well. But I believe we do not do the Bristol Bay survey. ADF&G does that, and I think that's coming up as well.
Okay.
So I think it'll be another couple of years
And we'll see you
before
return.
we come back. And I may be retired by then. So
That's all right. It's good to know, and don't retire quite yet. And then my last question is, this summer we had a lot of NOAA aerialness, and we're going to have again, we have the Pacific Marine Environmental Lab out of Seattle. That's NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center. They're doing hyperspectral camera work to try to come up with a way aerially to determine whether we're having a harmful algal bloom or what kind of algae are down below. And they could fly, which would be like an early warning system. And they're
yeah.
flying in and out of Nome with cameras in the belly. And we also have the NOAA Ice Seal Aerial Survey with the NOAA Seattle-based Polar Ecosystems Program that did a Strait Science not too long ago, and that we will see again up here. And they're using the Twin Otter, and they have a belly cam. And I just sit here and I think, if money's going to get tight, is there any synergy between you, any interconnectedness between these efforts coming out of Seattle area? I know you're in all different kind of programs and things where it's like, wow, that's 3 different things with belly cameras. Like that might be useful for people who use aerial survey for whatever. I know you've got your certain, I know there's reasons you're doing it, like we just heard, that certain times of the year in very certain ways. Is there any kind of
Yeah,
discussion,
well,
since you're all in Seattle, about maybe helping each other out or sort of bringing each other on board
and
a
you do
little?
bring up that point with, with funding being what it is. And in fact, for this bowhead survey, we're bringing people from the Polar Ecosystem Program as observers for that. We're
Wonderful.
borrowing their thermal imagery camera system for one of the aircraft. Because for our cetacean program, we cannot afford to ramp up and buy a $200,000 camera system just for a survey we may do every 10 years. I mean, by the
Right.
time we do it again, all of that technology is going to be old. So yeah, sharing resources, sharing personnel, sharing gear, and platforms. We're bringing, like you said, the NOAA Twin Otter's coming up. It's going to be in Alaska probably throughout the whole summer. It'll be doing stellar sea lion work. It'll be doing ice seal work. It'll be doing our bowhead work. So yeah, it's trying to do as much as we can with the resources we have. Exactly.
All right. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you again, Kim. And if you stay on for just a sec, I promise I won't hold you
No
very
worries.
long after everyone goes. Next week is Straight Science will be Thursday night. We'll be back on schedule, and it will be the 23rd of January. And we're going to have a different Straight Science in that the Colonel Patrick Collins, who is with the U.S. Special Operations Command, these are he's responsible for the special operations, special operation forces operations in North America. So last summer during July, we had Operation Polar Dagger, and they're going to tell us who they are, what they did, and then also their plans for Operation Polar Dagger 2025. So that will be next Thursday, a week from tomorrow on the 23rd. So the notices will go out for that probably tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Oh, and we have one last question quickly. Hi, Tony. I'm so
Kim.
curious, is the hyperspectral satellite imagery, is that able to supplement or replace the aerial algae surveys? That I don't know, Tony. We'll find out. There was a Strait Science on that, and there will be again on this.
Okay, that's
issue.
exciting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. If we can at least get the surface algae to tell us something, it might be very helpful for people's for people's health.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear
Food
about that
security, food safety.
because I know that it's really pretty inexpensive relative to putting fuel into an aircraft and flying people out there. We looked into using some of these tools last year instead of aerial reconnaissance. So exciting to see what's possible.
I think they're sort of feeding off each other, and they're because they can get, here's what it
Yeah.
looked like from this camera, here's what it looked like from outer space. And then if in the perfect world, if there's a research vessel or if it's near a community, they'll say, oh my gosh, can someone go out and get some of that water? And that calibrates it even more.
Yeah.
Right. So there is that effort going on right now. The harmful algal bloom issue is really big here, and
Yeah.
that poses a big threat. So thank you very much for that question. Stay tuned. All right. With that, you all have a good night. We're so glad you came in, and we'll see you next time.